Hello, everybody. We're looking at the sensory garden again today, and we're looking at smell today. What I'm going to do is show you a PowerPoint presentation of the sort of plants that you can use, and we'll talk through that. And then at the end, we're going to do a couple of activities using smell as the primary activity. But you will, don't worry if you see lots of names and things on this PowerPoint. You don't have to scribble them down quickly. You will get a copy of it, so you can just sit back and enjoy and think of things you may want to ask. So I'm going to start off just by talking, if this wants to. Sorry, my laptop's decided. Oh, there we go. So just to briefly talk about smell before we start about the plants. Smell has the power to affect our moods and mental states. So the smelling and aroma of something can help lift our spirits and calm our anxieties. So if you think yourselves, when you go for a walk in a wood, there's a wonderful earthy smell. Or you go outside in the summer and someone's cut the grass and you get that wonderful smell of newly cut grass. And that can conjure up memories for us or consciousness. And so that can evoke emotions and sensations that just looking, the visual beauty alone cannot. Now, in some cases, it will evoke emotions that are not so great, but that's all part of what happens with our senses. But there's research which has been done which shows that aromas, natural aromas like pine or mint, can reduce stress and anxiety. And the smells interact with our limbic system, which is the part of the brain controlling emotions and behavior. And there's a 5-year Swedish study, and I've put the details of the study at the bottom of this page, which showed that participants could clearly tell the difference between natural smells, garden smells, plant smells, and artificial odours or smells from things like perfumes or especially chemically produced perfumes or cleaning products. And what they found was the natural smells were associated with mostly positive emotions like joy, happiness, or maybe calm, whereas artificial ones can be said to induce stressful feelings because they were unpleasant or intrusive. So thinking about that, we're going to look at natural smells in this occasion, so either in the garden or in the house. Just to talk about this briefly, we want to focus on plants that either have flowers that are scented or scented leaves that can be crushed, and so they often release a stronger fragrance when they're touched or crushed, rather than when you smell the leaf sometimes. And we want to produce a variety of plants throughout the year, so it isn't just one time of year. Plants can be used to help people and enjoy the scent. And we want to be able to use plants which get positive emotional responses. So to a certain extent, it's an interaction between the people in your group, because it does vary. Some people hate hyacinths, some people love hyacinths, some people hate lilies, and it actually has almost a physical effect on them. So obviously, whatever you do in terms of introducing plants and scents, you have to be aware of the things that perhaps are difficult for people to have. And the other thing is, if you find that plants have definitely a positive reaction to the people in your group, you could encourage those members you could do activities which encourage people to take home, say, cuttings or dried flowers which have that scent that they like, and they could take them home or give them to their families. So it continues the positive effect of plants and their effect. So what I've done is to go through the season of different plants, and that's why I said there'd be quite a lot of names, and some of them you'll know, some maybe you won't know. Just looking at the year round and how we can think about introducing plants either to our garden or landscape or maybe in pots, so that we have an array of different plants that we can use in our groups. So obviously springtime, you tend to think about bulbs, spring bulbs, which have been planted in the autumn. And so there are various daffodils, particularly narcissus, which are the small daffodils, have quite strong scents. Hyacinths do, and there are other bulbs as well that you can introduce thinking ahead, so planting in the autumn and then enjoying in the spring, either in containers or out naturally grown in your gardens. Other shrubs, osmanthus is an evergreen shrub with lovely white flowers, very scented. And that's a good one to have, and you can get small osmanthus you can put in pots. So it's nice to have an evergreen, nice to have something with scents. Another lovely plant is the dwarf lilac. You know probably that lilacs get really big, but the dwarf one is nice, small one, which perhaps only grows to 1.5 meters. Again, be introduced to the garden easily or in a pot. Very nice to use there. Lily of the valley, another useful plant. Sorry, just trying to see the bottom of my screen. Is another lovely one. Lily of the valley can grow between paving slabs. They're a little bit choosy about where they go, but they're easily planted. And once they get established, they grow incredibly well, and they can be cut and brought in, as with any of these plants too. You can easily bring it in indoors if you don't have people who are mobile enough to go outside. Daphne is another lovely plant, very scented, evergreen, good spring plants. So there are quite a lot. I mean, there are going to be more than I've got listed here, but these are just some to give you ideas how to plant. Mock orange blossom, summer. Well, summer has an array of plants that are going to be scented and useful to use, and often easy to grow without difficulty. So mock orange blossom comes in the early part of the year, of the summer. In fact, it's flowering now, so we're in June. It's been a coldish spring, but normally it's June into July. Lovely perfumed flowers, white flowers, and you can either get them with green or this slightly yellow. You can see a picture of it there, the slightly yellow leaves. And then they can be huge, but there are lots of varieties which are small. And those are the ones to go for if you're putting them in a pot or, again, in a garden where you don't have much room. Lovely to cut and bring in. Peonies, which are lovely. People think they're difficult to grow. They're not. They just need time. They need light. They can be moved. They can be divided. And they come in an array of colours from whites and pinks to reds, but they're lovely to be cut and they have a good smell too. Wouldn't necessarily put them in a pot, but they'll certainly do in a garden. So then a couple of climbers for the summer. Star jasmine, which has the long name Trachelospermum. It's called star jasmine because the flower looks a bit like a jasmine flower, but it's very scented, but it is evergreen. So that is a benefit, whereas jasmine, which I put next, is deciduous, although beautifully scented, and you can get it in different colours. Actually, now Trachelospermum comes in different colours. A bit more expensive to buy than jasmine, but lovely. Trachelospermum will need you to provide some support, so you'd have to tie it in, say, on a trellis or an arch. Jasmine can wind its way around, but again, often they need support. Jasmine is quite vigorous, as you may know if you've ever grown it, and probably needs to be pruned quite frequently just to keep it controlled. But they're both beautifully scented climbers, so that's a great one. I'll also point out at this time that most of these scented shrubs or flowers need sunshine. So if you put them in a shady spot, you're not going to get the same effect. The sun will promote flowering, and that promotes then the smell as well. So it's quite important that if there's a bit of shade, that's okay, but not a lot of shade. Lilies, great for scent. Not all, as you may know, when you buy them, because you can buy them potted up because they're bulbs, or you can buy them cut. A lot of the coloured ones don't have a scent. So Lilium regale that I've mentioned there is just one of the ones that does have a lovely scent. It's a big white lily, very nice in the garden. And they will come again and again if they're happy where they are. Again, sunny, well drained. Most bulbs like well drained soil. Thing to look out for with lilies is the red lily beetle, which will lay its eggs under the leaves of the lily, and then the larvae will chomp away at the leaves and can strip a lily very quickly. So you do need to look out if you do have lilies in the garden. Sweet peas, well, you probably know about sweet peas, I'm sure, but you can grow them from seed. So they're an annual, and they are a climber, obviously, and beautiful scented flowers, lovely colours, many colours, but very scented, great to bring into the house to cut. And you encourage more flowering the more you cut it, and you don't allow it to develop a pea pod. As soon as it starts developing a pea pod, all its energy is going into producing the seeds in that pea pod. So you cut them off. Another thing to keep it going, because they can be prone to get mildew, sweet peas, but they get that because they get dry in the summer, although perhaps not this summer. So if the soil is fertile and you keep watering if necessary, and keep cutting off the flowers and bringing them in, and you're going to have a lovely display. And it's an easy thing to grow. So that's a fun thing to do with your group, because you can sow them either in the autumn, if you've got somewhere to overwinter them, or you can sow them in the spring. You can use toilet roll holders if you don't have pots, because they like a reasonable length for their roots, even when they're very small. So that's a fun thing to do with your group. Sweet peas. Sorry, I can't see the last two names at the bottom of this screen for some reason. Can you just say what they are, Lorna? For some reason, so, I've got a bar. Roses. The last two things I've got down. Oh, honeysuckle I've got down there.
Yeah, roses and honeysuckle.
Cosmos, yeah. As well. Honeysuckle, there's a picture of one there. Now, not all honeysuckles are scented, very well scented, but this particular variety is. And again, a vigorous climber. So you do need to prune in the spring to keep it under control. And again, honeysuckles, like lots of climbers, would like not to be too dry, because then they lose their leaves and they're not particularly attractive. But it's an excellent variety too, so go for that. Right, in the autumn, what happens? Well, lots of our flowering plants continue, if it's a warm autumn, to go into the autumn. But these are just some of the plants that will be still around, or making perhaps their best moment in the autumn. So the first picture is Abelia grandiflora with these little white but slightly flushed pink, sort of little trumpet-like flowers, quite small. It's an excellent shrub. It's what we call semi-evergreen, which means it gets really cold, it might lose some of its leaves, which will grow back again. It doesn't have any problems with pests at all. So it's an excellent shrub to have in the garden. And it has a gentle scent. It's not strongly scented, but it has a gentle scent. And it's a really good plant, a really excellent plant because of its lack of problems, easily pruned if you need to, but you don't need to prune it. And it goes flowers into the autumn, which is excellent. There are lots of other varieties of Abelia grandiflora, so they now have devised ones that have more pink flowers or have slightly orangey leaves. So if you look it up and you look at the different varieties, you can see different colours and so on. But it's a really good plant to have. Viburnum farrii is viburnums. There are lots of viburnums around, and there's Viburnum tinus, which is a sort of winter flowering plant that you see around petrol stations and supermarkets. It's so tough and doesn't smell. But Viburnum farrii is one of the lovely smelly ones. So it's a pretty tall shrub. So you have to have a reasonably sized garden to put it in. But it will give you lovely autumn scented flowers. A smaller plant now, Gladiolus murali, is gladioli. You probably know the big colourful gladioli that you get in the summer. Gladiolus murali is a much more subtle white one and is lovely and scented. So that's a great bulb to get for, if you, especially in a container or in a slightly rocky place, but again, sunny, well drained, it would like. On the right is the tobacco plant, which is an annual, which you can grow from seeds. So it's another one you could do with your group. And there are many different sorts of tobacco plants, but some of them are scented. So Nicotiana alata is the slightly greeny one, and it has a scent. And again, lovely for containers, window boxes, anything like that. A little carry-on flowering right into the autumn, but it will die because it's an annual then. So you could collect seeds, or you could just sow it again in the spring the following year. The evening primrose, again, you probably are aware of the name, and it's certainly used in sort of herbal medicine. But it's a lovely yellow flower, which gives off its scent generally in the sort of early evening or the later part of the day if it's a warm day. So that's another plant which perhaps you may not have thought of, but is easy. It's this biennis means it's biennial, so it only lasts 2 years, but it will seed itself around. Once you've got it, it'll seed itself around. So that's some of the autumn plants. In the winter, funnily enough, in the winter, there are probably more scented flowering shrubs than most times. And it's partly because insects in the summer are attracted to big, colourful flowers, as well as small ones, but especially big, colourful flowers. And those don't occur in our winter. So what we have are small flowers on many of these shrubs, but they're scented, which is what attracts the insects to come and pollinate them and to get the nectar from them. So there are quite a lot of really nicely scented winter shrubs, and we tend to forget about the winter and not think about the garden. But if we think about planting up a place where people will walk by, so it could be a front garden or near a path where people are going in and out, so they will smell and appreciate the winter flowering plants. If you put them down the end of the garden, they're going to be ignored because it's pretty likely during the winter you're not going to go that far. One lovely shrub, witch hazel, and there's a picture of its yellow flower, which actually makes it look a lot bigger than it really is. It's much smaller than that. But before it gets its leaves in the spring, and that's again typical of winter flowering shrubs, you get this beautiful stems covered with these tiny little flowers, but very scented. And it comes either in a sort of yellowy, soft yellow color, or you can get it in an orange color. It's a slow growing shrub, but it will end up being a shrub probably about 2 meters high. So again, not for a very small garden. But if it's put in a container, that keeps plants small. It just means you've got to look after them well and put them in good quality soil if it's going to be a shrub in a container. So they need topsoil put in there, not just multi-purpose compost. But witch hazel is very nice, but because it's slow growing, not that cheap to buy, but if you can get one, it's really worth it. In the next picture, sweet box. Now that's a container, you can see it's a winter container there with rosemary, heathers, And at the back of the box, you can probably just see some very thin, greeny stems. And on those stems, if you look really closely, you may see some tiny, tiny white flowers. You can hardly see them, but it gives off a fantastic smell. So that's particularly one I like to have near my front door or somewhere in my front garden. So as I walk up and down, I can smell it. And obviously, because the confugia is a small variety, it's great in a container. And so you don't have, it's not visually very fantastic, but the smell is fantastic and it's evergreen, so it'll be there all year round. So that's Sweet Box, which is Sarcococca. Lots of C's in Sarcococca, I always get confused. Ha ha, confuser. So the winter honeysuckle is not a climbing honeysuckle. It's a member of the same family, so it's got the same name, Lonicera. But it's more shrubby. And that again, it's not beautiful to look at, but its small flowers give off a fantastic smell. So hence the name Fragrantissima, because it is very fragrant and again can be cut and brought in the house. So that's a biggish shrub, easily hacked back if it gets too big, but it will get quite woody. But it is, if you've got a big area and you're lucky enough to have a big garden, it would be something I'd include because of the lovely fragrance and the fact you can bring it in and put it in jars in the house and have that smell. Earlier in the winter, Mahonia does its yellow flowering. Now, Mahonia winter sun is, on the whole, Mahonias are quite spiky evergreen plants. So again, you need to have a biggish space. But the smell of the yellow flowers are almost like lily of the valley. It's a fantastic smell. Not an overwhelming smell, but a gentle, soft lily of the valley smell. There is a Mahonia which has been developed called Soft Caress, and that doesn't have the spiky leaves. It has much softer leaves, and that will flower autumn time, but it will be the same thing, same scented yellow flowers. So Mahonia is worth looking at, even if perhaps you're used to the big spiky ones. There are other ones. Winter Sweet, another shrub, which again flowers, small little tiny yellow flowers on its bare stems. But it's a wonderful smell. So that's another thing to think of at the back of a border. Bit big for a container, but certainly the back of the border too. And you may have come across skimmias because they're often sold to put in winter containers or winter window boxes. This Skimmia japonica rubella is the male version. They come in male or female. The females have the red berries that you're probably used to seeing. But the male version, rubella, only has the flowers, the inflorescence, the little tiny flowers on it. And it also has a gentle smell. So if you're thinking of doing something in a window box or in a container, again, near to a door, near to where you're going to be, and you see them, so they're pretty freely available, Skimmia japonica rubella, because it's such a useful plant to put in a container. So that will also give you the slight scent, which is rather nice, not overpowering at all. At the bottom, the pink flower that you look at in the photo is another viburnum, and this is Viburnum bodnantense. Bodnant is a famous garden in near the beginning in Wales, where this was developed, and it flowers again on bare stems before the leaves come in the spring. This one's called Dawn, and I always remembered the name because I think pink is a girl, so it must be called Dawn, because there's another one that's white. So Dawn is this sweet pink color, but a lovely scent. They're quite tall. They can get up to 3 meters, but you can prune them easily after they've flowered. And again, I think not necessarily for a container, unless you've got a huge container, but it could go in a garden as a lovely, attractive to look at and pleasant stems to bring in, again, cut and bring in, happy, they don't mind being pruned at all. So the winter selection tends to be shrubby, because that's where the best winter scents come from, apart from other. So I'm going to whiz over to, yeah, sorry, just go back a bit. Apart from bulbs, of course. So the winter bulbs, which you plant in the autumn, which you can put into containers or again into the ground. And we're repeating the bulbs that we mentioned before in the spring. So you will have prepared in the autumn to have your bulbs, which will be giving you lovely smells in the winter. So if we then move on to look at scented leaves, we've been looking at them up till now at flowers. But of course, there are plenty of plants which give us scented leaves and which need to be crushed, whereas the flowers will give off their scent without you having to touch them. Scented leaves are plants where you actually interact with the plant, and you will either cut a bit and feel it, or you'll just brush your hand over it. And that's a nice feeling for some people, not for everybody. Some of the summer flowering scented leaf geraniums, which are actually pelargoniums, they're not the hardy geraniums. These are ones you can buy and you have out in the summer, so they're tender, but they can be brought into the house. So then they continue to live in the house and give you the same enjoyable scented leaves. And the scented leaf geraniums have a great array of different scents. So some might be like this picture, attar of roses, has a rose smelling, but there are lemon smelling ones. There are just general herby smelling ones. So they're a great source of leaves that can be touched. Also, they can be put into cooking. They can be put into biscuits and things like that. It's edible. Or they can be added to potpourri. So they're great. You can take cuttings from them because they're in the same geranium family that you would be taking cuttings from anyway. But as I say, they're tender and you bring them in. So they're nice to have outside, perhaps in pots, and then just bring them in the winter time or as soon as the temperature really drops. Another good plant for scented leaves, and you can see on the right the cotton lavender Santolina, grey-leaved, so it tells you it needs to be in the sunshine because it's protecting itself by the hairs on the leaves turning it grey. And it's interesting because scents do remind you of things in your life, and cotton lavender reminds me of my grandmother who always had hedges of it. So it's definitely something which brings back those memories for me. It has little yellow round button-like flowers for a period in the summer, but basically you have it for its grey foliage and its scent. As soon as you brush past it, you get a scent. It's not like lavender, it's a different scent, impossible to describe, but it makes a change from lavender to have. You could have it in pots, you could have it as a hedge. So you can use Santolina. I don't think it's enough used. It's easy to trim if it gets leggy, but it's a nice, interesting scented little sort of semi-shrub, sort of sub-shrub. So it means like lavender, it won't last forever, but it'll be happy in a sunny spot. So what else can we have with scented leaves? There's the usual herbs. So we've got, but one of the ones that perhaps you don't use as much as some of the ones we're used to is lemon balm, which is called Melissa officinalis. Now, the only problem with it, you buy a pot, and is that it will seed itself all over the garden. So that could be a blessing, or it could not be a blessing. The good thing is if things seed themselves, you can then pot them up and give them to people. So that might be quite fun to do. But it has a lovely lemony smelling leaf, which you can use for teas and things like that. There's another plant which you get confused with, you might get confused, called lemon verbena, which has a really bitter lemon, lovely smell, but lemon verbena is definitely on the tender end of things, whereas lemon balm is hardy enough, so it won't be a problem in Scotland. Lemon verbena is definitely something which really only lasts in the summer. Sage, lots of, obviously, Salvia officinalis is the normal culinary sage, the sage you use for cooking, which you can put in pots and so on. But there's lots of other salvias that are flowering plants that we use in the garden, and they all have scented leaves. So it doesn't matter which variety it is, they all have scented leaves. You wouldn't use all the other ones, the flowering, pretty cultivated flowering ones for cooking with, but nevertheless, they are plants that you can rub and feel. And sage we're used to. Bay, you can obviously cook with bay. It will turn into a huge tree, so I would suggest you're aware of that, but great in containers and a lovely strong smell. Rosemary, of course, you're used to. It's changed its name now and it belongs to the Salvia family. So if you went to buy some and you saw it labelled with Salvia rosmarinus, it is rosemary. It's changed its name. They do that just to confuse us. And so on. So there are quite a lot of herbs and scented leaf plants that you can use, which are really useful to use. Here's some indoor plants for scent as well. These are tender perennials that come from countries where it doesn't get the winter we have. And they can be very attractive and have quite strong smells. So on the right, we've got a picture of a Hoya. Hoya, like some of the other plants, the Madagascan jasmine and the jasmine polyanthum, they're all climbers. So you often see them when they're being sold is sort of wound round in a circle, or you have to give them something to climb on. But the Hoya is really beautiful and fantastic smell. The Stephanotis is called the Madagascan jasmine. It's not, it's another lovely climber. Jasmine polyanthum is a jasmine, but it's tender. So it's the same as the jasmine we grow in our gardens, but it's is more tender. We can't put it outside, but you can buy it as a house plant. And of course, gardenia as well is another lovely shrub, which again you can plant. You need to follow instructions about feeding them at the right time when they're flowering, but they do bring scent in. Apart from that, of course, we're used to growing bulbs and preparing them for flowering indoors in usually around Christmas time or during the winter. So many of the bulbs are prepared so that they will flower indoors, and you can grow lots of these little narcissus as really beautiful scented flowers indoors. And in fact, there is a trellis YouTube, which tells you about growing indoor bulbs and preparing them for Christmas. Hyacinths, some people like them, some people find them very strong and perhaps too much, but they can be prepared and put somewhere. And there are some amaryllis as well, the pink flower that you see, the big amaryllis that are scented as well. So there are quite a lot, and there's definitely much more information on the Trellis YouTube about how to grow these. And that's a very simple way and a fun way for a group to prepare bulbs to have scents indoors.